I am pleased to tell you that Alaskans were really participating in this debate, fully engaged in the national debate over the stimulus. More than 5,000 Alaskans contacted my office to express a viewpoint about the stimulus package. And those who contacted us opposed the package by a margin of about 2 to 1. Alaskans were telling me pretty loud and clear that throwing large sums of money at the wall and seeing what sticks was not necessarily the change that they had been hoping for. So the economic stimulus is now law. For the sake of our country, I truly hope that it works better than I think it will. I opposed this massive spending bill because I thought that there was a better approach. When we spend more in one day than we have for the war in Iraq for the entire 7 years that we've been there, we need to make sure that we get it right. Now, the democratic process has worked its will. We've got a new law. My job now is to make sure that there's accountability, that there's transparency in how the funds will be spent. Now, there are some good things in this stimulus package for Alaska. We've got funding that goes to Indian Health Services to provide for construction. There's funds for rural sanitation, transportation funding, renewable energy block grants. And I know that we will identify other pots of money that can be brought home for good use. We've got some really great grant writers in this state, and that's going to help us. And I will tell you that I will do all that I can to ensure that Alaska gets its share of this economic stimulus package. You here in the legislature also have a role in this, and I know that you appreciate it, but your role in helping to make sure that the money that ultimately comes to Alaska, whether through formulas or through grants, is allocated quickly and allocated wisely. But we don't want to lose sight of the bigger picture here when we're talking about this stimulus package. We've got to pay for what we borrow. Don't have to be a legislator to understand that. My teenage boys can understand that. We're going to have to pay for what we have borrowed. Before the stimulus was signed, we were already running a national debt on the order of nearly $11 trillion. About $2.3 trillion was owned by foreign countries as of last November, and about 17% of this debt is held by China. We will once again be borrowing from these folks to finance our debt. But sooner or later, that debt has to be paid off, and it's the American people, it's our children and our grandchildren who are eventually going to be paying this bill. Now, another area about which Alaskans are justifiably concerned is how the new administration will choose to approach Alaska's energy and lands issues. We remember, perhaps some more vividly than others, but we remember the Clinton years. The assault on the Tongass, the troubles that inholders faced in accessing their property, the closure of public lands without weighing the impact on affected communities, the practice of issuing citations to Alaskans first and then perhaps asking questions later. Things have been a little bit better for the past 8 years. We've seen some progress in the Park Service relationships with the inholders in Wrangell St. Elias, just as one example. I am guardedly optimistic that Alaska will have a stronger voice on the management of federal lands in this administration than we did under the Clinton administration. You may ask the question, well, what gives you this optimism? And there's some changes out there that we're seeing. We're beginning to see a more collaborative approach between the conservation groups and the development groups towards resolving disputes. And a quick example of this is the situation out in King Cove and the land exchange out there. It was about 10 years ago. King Cove failed in its effort to get a road to the all-weather airport there at Cold Bay because the environmental community had blocked it. But the people of King Cove didn't give up. They persevered. They traveled to meetings across the country. They told their story in the media. They won support from national leaders in the Native American community. They negotiated a compromise with the Energy Committee Democrats. They did all the work that they needed to do, but it was the reach out and that collaborative effort. Early this year, my bill passed the Senate with overwhelming bipartisan support. It's now awaiting action in the House, where we're hopeful that that will wrap up here very shortly. But the bill establishes now a framework that I hope will lead to the construction of a state road through the Eisenbeck Refuge to the Cold Bay Airport. Another example is the Tongass Futures Roundtable. For the past couple years, the roundtable, composed of representatives of family-owned timber businesses, the environmental groups, the state, local governments, they've all been coming together and meeting. They've been exploring how to provide a secure timber supply to the local mills in Southeast, to diversify the Southeast economy, and really to end decades of long litigation over the Tongass. I truly applaud their stated desires, but I know that the success of their efforts is going to be judged by its results. But I think this is yet one more example of the collaborative approach that we are seeing out there. Now, unfortunately, none of this analysis currently applies to the Endangered Species Act. The Endangered Species Act, as it is presently structured, rewards litigation and not the thoughtful resolution of issues. Certainly not the avoidance of unintended consequences like what a polar bear listing will mean for the life of an Inupiaq Eskimo living up in the North Slope Borough. I do intend to work with the administration and the conservation community to bring a new attitude on these issues, but quite honestly, this is going to be a challenge. This will not be easy. But I'm an optimist by nature, always have been. I mean, even my blood type is B positive. That's not a joke. That's really true. Check my Red Cross card. But this is why I believe so very, very deeply that we must keep talking about these difficult issues. So long as there's a conversation about the issue, then the issue's out there on the table. And as long as the issue remains out on the table, there's an opportunity for us to find a solution. Alaska's support for the responsible exploration of the coastal plain has remained constant. But in recent years, the administration seemed to have given up on ANWR. It's just too hard to accomplish. And I've been disappointed in that result, and I think it's probably fair to say that you all have shared my disappointment in that. The challenge for us is to get ANWR back on the table, to reopen that national conversation, to reconcile our interest in developing the oil reserves beneath ANWR with the national interest in preserving the wilderness experience. So when I go back to Washington, I intend to introduce legislation that will enable the oil reserves beneath ANWR to be explored and produced through directional drilling from locations outside the exterior boundaries of the refuge.